really a privilege to be able to got it to be able to talk to servants of the Buddha last time, because I was just reading, Professor Minori's article actually about the long history of servants of the Buddha as a continuous English language Dharma talk program. So I'm joining you from Sydney in Australia, and like Minori mentioned, our community is actually very multicultural. In the past, I used to go for alms rounds in Middle Eastern migrant neighborhoods. But these days I'm doing a lot of, very different places. I'm also picking up a lot of our Khmer and Vietnamese refugee supporters, refugee and migrant. So yeah, it's a slightly different environment to say perhaps what you might have in Sri Lanka, but nonetheless, a very inspiring place to be. And as Minori mentioned, one of the things that I've been working on recently together with the committee has been getting our own Bhikkhuni Irama established. So we've been working on that over a number of years. And our association was recently incorporated as Uppalavanna Irama. So the name of our place actually being, derived from Uppalavanna Theri. So I just wanted to share a few reflections this evening about, who Uppalavanna Theri was. And, not just according to some of the later stories, but actually according to the core material in the canon. So I was actually, when I picked this topic, I was actually wondering, can I get an hour and a half out of it? Because there isn't actually that much on Uppalavanna in the canon itself. We have the verses, which are in the Therigatha, which we'll be looking at this evening. We also have another sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, and possibly also mentioned in the Anguttara Nikaya. But apart from that, the sources are a little bit scarce. But I think it should be okay, though, just to look at these very early sources and maybe to read them independently of what we may have in mind from other texts, like the Vinaya or from the commentary. So I'm going to screen share, and what I thought we'd do, if it's okay with everyone, is we just read through the verses at a relaxed pace, and as we read, I'll just give some comments. Share the screen. So we're sharing. You would have all heard from my teacher, Bhante Sujato, last week. So we're using his English translation to just have a look at these Therigatha verses. The two of us were co-wives, though we were mother and daughter. I was struck with a sense of urgency, so astonishing and hair-raising. Curse those filthy sensual pleasures, so nasty and thorny, where we, both mother and daughter, had to be co-wives together. Seeing the danger in sensual pleasures, seeing renunciation as sanctuary, I went forth in Rajagaha, from the lay life to homelessness. And already, actually, we've just read three Gathas here, and we can see what's going on. So it's talking about a pair of women, and this pair of women are mother and daughter. And, they're in this kind of nearly incestuous situation where both the mother and daughter have been married to the same man. And, obviously that would be quite an unpleasant situation for them, and this is the reflection that I was struck with a sense of urgency, so astonishing and hair-raising. And the speaker here is really cursing sensuality, for actually leading to them to this type of horrendous situation where, they're both married to the same person. Which is really quite an opening, actually. The verses aren't really holding back anything here in terms of their condemnation of what we call, kamachanda, the sensual desire in Buddhism. And these two verses have actually confused a lot of people over the past few thousand years. Because what happens is other traditions end up taking these two verses to be part of Uppalavanna Theri's story. And, this happens in other traditions, like in the Mulasavastivada tradition, where, the Vinaya actually has this story, of Uppalavanna, being one of the co-wives. But actually, what's happened is these first two verses have probably been copied and pasted, from another location, where they actually relate to the mother and daughter of another Thera, another monk, whose name was Gangathirya, in the Therigatha. So these two verses, they're in the Uppalavanna Therigatha, but actually, according to the commentary, this isn't their original home. They've been taken from somewhere else. And this is what the Pali commentary tells us. And, that's important because otherwise, we end up confusing them with Uppalavanna Theri's main story. And the reason they're here is because basically it's shocking. It's the shock value. That's really just putting it out there. That's, the kind of results we see in the world as because of people's sensuality. Okay, so from here, from the Therigatha, this is actually Uppalavanna Theri's story. So, seeing the danger in sensual pleasures, seeing renunciation as sanctuary, I went forth in Rajagaha from the lay life to homelessness. So, this is every monk and nun story that, they see some type of danger and they see the advantage in renunciation. So they make a decision to go forth and to practice meditation. And here Uppalavanna Theri is continuing. I know my past lives. My clairvoyance is clarified. I comprehend the minds of others. My clairaudience is purified. I've realized the psychic powers and attained the ending of defilements. I've realized the 6 kinds of direct knowledge and fulfilled the Buddha's instructions. So here, talking about her attainment of what's called the Chalabhinya. So, the supernormal knowledge, and also her own Iddhi, which is the psychic powers. So this is something which obviously, for Uppalavanna Theri, that she was the foremost in. She was the foremost chief nun-disciple in psychic powers. So like Minoru was saying, the counterpart of Moggallana Thera, the Buddha's foremost monk disciple in supernormal powers. And she continues, I created a 4-horsed chariot using my psychic powers. Then I bowed at the feet of the Buddha, the glorious protector of the world. So again, we're jumping a little bit here with the verses because there isn't actually a lot of context. To actually be able to understand what's going on here, you need to know the backstory. Otherwise, what we get, we just have verses which are a bit disconnected, because we've had the first two gathas, which were actually taken from another place, condemning sensuality. We have the next three gathas, which are about Uppalavanna Theri's psychic accomplishments. And suddenly we have this incident where Uppalavanna Theri has created, a mind-made chariot using her psychic powers, and she's bowing at the feet of the Buddha. And we might think, okay, where is this actually coming from? And to know that, you need to know that Uppalavanna, she, during her lifetime, she performed something which is called in Pali a patiharya, which is like a miracle maybe in English. And the first time I heard about this, actually, it was in a book of paintings from the Ajanta caves in India, where they have these very beautiful wall murals. And one of these wall murals was actually showing this this scene where she's actually presenting herself as what we call a wheel-turning monarch, or a Chakravarti. So it's this very, to me, it's a very striking scene, because when we think of women, sometimes we get this kind of dual narrative, that on the one hand, women, we're expected to be in these strong roles, like mother or daughter, these very important roles within the family. But on the other hand, you have this narrative, where women are sometimes portrayed as being quite helpless or weak. And, she's not really doing either of those. She's not, she's not fulfilling a domestic role, and she's not helpless and weak either. She's actually, she's showing what she really is from the inside, as this mental image of a wheel-turning monarch. Because when we think of a wheel-turning monarch, we think about power, we think about mastery, we think about accomplishment. So she's actually showing, something that's really defied a lot of these stereotypical roles, and is coming from the internal attainment that she has as an arahant. And that's what she's actually demonstrating, through this kind of psychic display, where she's actually presenting herself as a Chakravarti, with the chariot and with the horses. And, this is what she's showing in front of the Buddha. And, some of the explanations for, why is she showing this miracle? In the past, and, even today, some people think that women can't attain awakening. In some sects of Jainism, for example, in Shwetambara Jainism, people today still think that, it's not possible for women to become arihants in their tradition. But what Uppalavanna Theri is really showing us here is, yes, of course it's possible, because she's done it. And not only has she done it, she's done it with all of the accessories, with all of the, the clairaudience and the clairvoyance as well. And I think part of the reason for me personally, when we were looking at names actually for our monastery, for our arama, one of the reasons why Uppalavanna Theri really leaped out to me was that we don't actually have a lot of art about the nuns from the Buddha's time. By the classical, by the medieval period, we're not really getting any portraits of nuns at all. And sorry, we just have some. Okay, are we all good? I'll just keep talking about Uppalavanna in art, because what we see actually is, we see the scene with the ladder, where the Buddha, in the Abhidharma narrative, where the Buddha is actually descending from heaven at Sankasa. In some versions of that story, it's Uppalavanna who meets the Buddha at the base of the ladder. So for that reason, we actually have quite a number of artworks which show Uppalavanna. And, she's one of the nuns who actually has had her depiction preserved in history. and that's across, various different traditions. So I really liked that idea of, the image persisting of Uppalavanna Theri. Okay, and so the verses are going to jump again. So I hope you're all all with us so far, because we're going to jump now to another narrative that involves Uppalavanna, which is, it's very common actually for these Therigatha verses, just to have them pulled from here and there. So the verse continues. You come to the sal tree, all crowned with flowers, and stand at its root all alone. But you have no companion with you. Silly girl, aren't you afraid of rascals? Okay, so all of you Sri Lankans, you all know much more about sal trees than I do. I have been shown photos of sal trees, and they look very beautiful. I have never seen a sal tree in real life, so please forgive me for not being the expert on this one. So, according to the story, the Uppalavanna Theri used to go to a grove called Andavanna to meditate during the day. That was what was called her daytime abode. And if you've been to Shravasti or to Savati, and if you've seen the forest in that area, actually it's a bit. I don't know how to describe it. It's a bit. It looks a bit suspect. it's not really the type of place where I'd think, okay, this is where I really want to go for a walk. And even from the Buddhist, even from an earlier period, there were a lot of stories that associated this grove with robbers and with various undesirable social elements. And so someone has approached Uppalavanna and is asking her, like, aren't you afraid? You've come here all alone. And this is actually attributed to Mara. This is the voice of Mara speaking here. So this is Uppalavanna Theri's reply. Even if 100,000 rascals like this were to gang up, I'd stir not a hair nor tremble. What could you do to me all alone, Mara? Interesting. And this is what she says. She says, I'll vanish, or I'll enter your belly. I could stand between your eyebrows, and you still wouldn't see me. I'm the master of my own mind. I've developed the basis of psychic power well. I've realized the 6 kinds of direct knowledge and fulfilled the Buddha's instructions. Again, all of these things actually being a description of her mastery. Because sometimes when we think, like, what does Mara do, right? This is people's understanding that Mara will possess people. So we have this kind of motif where Mara actually possesses people by entering into their belly, so to speak, or by somehow taking control over or mastery over that person's body. Like in a sort of like demonic possession. But here, actually, she's flipped the tables. It's not Mara having control over her. It's her actually having control over Mara. And this is what she's saying. I'll vanish or I'll enter your belly. I could stand between your eyebrows and you still wouldn't see me. So she's actually got the upper hand in this situation. Mara, of course, one of the meanings of Mara being Mara, what we call Mara Devaputta, who's the deity from the Paranimitta Vasavati realm. So, what is the Paranimitta Vasavati realm all about? It's about control of others' creations. So that's Mara's role in the story here, as Mara the, Mara the tempter, Mara the controller, trying to seek influence. in the world, and to interrupt people's journeys to liberation. And we can see, the role Mara plays here in the narrative as well. Okay. So she's making the same type of declaration here, that she's developed the basis of psychic power well and has realized the 6 kinds of direct knowledge and fulfilled the Buddha's instructions. So I'll just actually get up those 6 kinds of direct knowledge so we can see what they are. I'm just getting up the Chalabinya. One second. So the Chalabinya being, first of all, the higher powers, which are the Iti Vidya, such as walking on water and through walls. I mean, that would be nice, like a ghost. You could just walk through the walls, but better because you'd be an arahant. Number 2 is divine ear. So Dibba Sota, that is clairaudience. So you can hear whatever you want. Number 3 is mind penetrating knowledge, which is the Chaito Hariya, so telepathy. Number 4 is remembering one's former abodes, which is the Pube Nivasanisati, so to remember one's past lives. Number 5 is the divine eye, which is the Dibachaku, that is, other people's karmic destinations. And number 6 being the extinction of mental intoxicants, which is the Asava Kaya Jnana, which is also part of the Tevijja of Arahantship. Those last 3 are the Tevijja, the 3 higher knowledges. So, this particular set actually comes up in a number of places. So, for example, it's also found in the Samanyapala Sutta in the Digha Nikaya, presumably talking about some of the benefits of awakening. And, the thing about all of these is that they're developed on the basis of the 4th jhana. So that is all about psychic power. And actually, we talked about, what did we talk about earlier? We talked about miracles as well earlier. We talked about this Pali word, patiharya, meaning a display or a miracle. And actually in Buddhism, there are 3 types of miracles. So which I had because I checked them earlier, but because it's late here, my mind is just failing me and not doing what I want it to do. So I'm going to actually get them up so we can have a look at the different types of patiharya, because one of them is what we call a desana patiharya, which is, the minds of others. Another is, okay, got it. Okay, the first one, this is what I was trying to say. The first of these type of patiharyas is what's called Iddhi patiharya. So 1, winning over people by demonstrating supernatural powers. The second one is what's called Adesana patiharya, which is winning over people by demonstrating knowledge of other people's minds. And the third of them is Anusasani patiharya, winning people over by explaining, the truth. And we call that last one, the miracle of instruction. And these are all explained in the Therigatha Sutta. So anyway, just a bit of a digression on the meaning of the term patiharya, a miracle. So continuing on with the Gatha. So this is Uppalavanna Theri speaking. So she continues. Sensual pleasures are like swords and stakes. The aggregates are their chopping block. What you call sensual delight is now no delight for me. Relishing is destroyed in every respect, and the mass of darkness is shattered. So know this, wicked one, you're beaten, Terminator. Wow, very, very powerful. And again, Uppalavanna Theri is telling us about the drawback of sensuality. Because when we think about sensuality, right, we think, about things that we eat or drink. We might think about, relationships with a partner, that type of sensuality. But actually, sensuality is a lot broader than that. Sensuality is anything that we can experience in the world of the five senses, where the mind is the sixth sense. So, even just engaging with the world of the five senses, it takes so much out of us. It makes us so, it's just so tiring, to have to constantly engage with the sense world. And one of the terms that is used for jhana actually in Pali is viveka. So we have, in Sinhala, like you can say viveka, right? And it means you're kind of like you're taking a rest, yeah? Like, viveka ganava, I think you take a rest. But in Pali, it has this very specific meaning of seclusion. So you're actually withdrawn. And there's two types of viveka, that we talk about. So we talk about kaya viveka, seclusion of the body, and chitta viveka, seclusion of the mind. And, sometimes we think, right, like we just want to leave the world behind, it's all too much. It's not like it's bad or anything, but it's just, we need rest. We need, a place where we can actually just go inside of ourselves and just come back and be refreshed and, look at the world with fresh eyes. And when you come out of meditation, it's like that because, you've had a chance to really, purify your own mental state. And I think, Ajahn Brahm, he does such a great job of explaining this. And, his description of coming out of meditation, he says, it's like someone's been cleaning the grass. It's like someone's gone out there and polished every single blade of grass, because the world, the greens are greener, the sky is brighter, everything's suddenly alive and fresh and new. And, they contrast, sensuality in the very coarse forms and also in the forms of what we call like the kama vitaka, which, it's the more subtle aspect of just even thinking about the world. It doesn't really contribute, anything new. It takes energy, but it doesn't really pay us back. What really pays us back in terms of that internal energy, in terms of the iddhipadas, is the life of the mind that we develop through bhavana, or through that mental development through meditation. Because like when we think about iddhis, right? Like what is iddhi? Iddhi is it's our mental power. And how do we get that mental power? We don't get that mental power by going out into the world all the time. We get that mental power by, through purification within. And that's why we have this other set of 4 terms in Buddhism, which is the 4 iddhipada, these 4 pathways to power or to mastery or to to psychic accomplishment. And, in Pali, they're chanda. So, we need to have that will. We need to have the will to meditate, the will for bhavana. Unless we actually have that motivation, we were born into samsara and we'll die in samsara. We need to actually have some type of decision making. We need to make a decision at some point that actually, okay, we don't want to do that. What we want to do right now is we want to meditate. So that, that thing that makes the decision, the drive, the energy, the will, that is what's called chanda. And in this context, chanda has a wholesome function because it's the desire that leads to the end of desires. So, like sometimes when we have like kama chanda, which is the sense desire, there's a bit of a negative sense. But here, this is wholesome chanda. So, chanda, or English will, being the first of what we call the 4 paths to success, or the 4 bases of psychic accomplishment, the 4 iddhipadas. So the next one being virya. So we go from having that will to developing energy or virya. And what happens, right? As we withdraw from our engagement in the external world, we get more energized. And this is the same too, if we think about it in terms of the bhujangas, right? You also have virya as part of this energizing section of the 7 limbs of awakening, or the bhujangas, if you're used to thinking about meditation in that way, where you actually go from mindfulness, which is sati, to the dhammavicaya, which is the discrimination of states, knowing wholesome states from unwholesome states, to the virya, to the piti, the sati, upekkha, samadhi. So we can see, in that 7 set of factors that, maybe some of you might be familiar with already, that we have energy. Right up front. And the way the bhujangas works is that the earlier bhujangas are the energizing ones. Sati, mindfulness, is always helpful. Then you have dhammavicaya, virya, and piti. Those 3, so the discrimination of states, the energy, and the rapture, those 3 are actually the energizing set within the bhujangas. And then you have the remainder, which are passaddhi, the calm, the samadhi, which is the that mental absorption you get in meditation, and upekkha as equanimity. Those are the calming aspects of the bhujangas. So, at the beginning of our meditation, right, we do need a little bit of a push. We need a little bit of a drive to actually, to actually bring us to a point where we want to meditate. It might be sometimes that we're feeling like we're already feeling quite energized because maybe we're meditating beforehand, or maybe, our mind was just a bit clearer. And in that case, people don't always necessarily need to cultivate that energizing set of bhujangas further. If you're already feeling energized, it's okay just to, just to start straight from the calm and just to proceed directly to the latter part of the bhujangas. And this is explained quite clearly in the suttas, that, not every part of meditation has the same factors, the same characteristics. Only, some parts are more energizing, some parts are more calming, and we need to look at our own minds, like, what do we need right now? And, over time, we can develop more maturity in our meditation, where we can actually be moving on to those more mature calming factors. So, like, when people start practicing meditation, it's normal, to sometimes have a lot of rapture, a lot of, even the physical sensations, like crying, like hair standing on end, like feeling like you're floating. But, it's over time, what happens is that just very, very naturally, if you keep going that way, the mind becomes more comfortable with just being calm. And we don't necessarily always need to go through the hair standing on end thing, every single time. It's all wholesome, but it's actually those higher stages of calmness that really propel us, into the samadhi, which we described earlier as being seclusion. That seclusion from the sensual world. Okay, so we were talking about sensual pleasures like swords and stakes. I think she's put it very well. I think that's exactly what would describe it as. The aggregates are like their chopping block. Do I know what is a chopping block? I think that's like, where you have like you're trying to kill the chicken, and I think that's like the block. If you have the axe coming down, like that's the block the axe is on. I think that's what she means. So what she's calling this block that the axe is going to hit, this is actually the khandhas. She's saying the khandhas are like this big block of wood, and we're just like just waiting, for the axe to strike. And actually, I don't know if this is offensive because most people, we like our bodies, right? We don't think it's such a bad thing. We think it's okay, being reborn, it's okay. I suffer a little. There's some nice bits too. Like overall, it's not so bad. But actually, if we think about it, it's really quite terrible because everyone we know is going to die, and we're also going to die. So we can appreciate why the arahants are talking to us, using this language to really, to really talk about the horror of the human situation. And we have this line here: what you call sensual delight is now no delight for me. And I think there's a saying, actually, what the world says is happiness, the arahants say is suffering. So this is really putting things in their correct perspective. And we have this last verse. So relishing is destroyed in every respect. So I think this is just a synonym for what originally would have been something like Pali. That's probably Nandi or something in Pali. So enjoyment. So she's not enjoying anything. And the mass of darkness is shattered. So again, when we talk about the mass of darkness, maybe she's talking about ignorance. So we have this Pali word, avijja, which is the opposite of the tevijja that we talked about, the three knowledges. But here we have avijja, here we have not knowing. And this is, in the commentary tradition, actually, we have this term, paccayakara, which is the maker of causes. So ignorance is the maker of causes. So it stands, really at that head point of why are we trapped in causal reality, due to our ignorance. And the whole 12 links of dependent origination, they they just keep getting worse from there. It starts from avijja, paccaya, sankhara, and it only gets worse. So this is the massive darkness. So know this, wicked one, your beaten terminator. Wouldn't that be nice, actually, to just go back after meditation and to have this really great meditation and just have a really lovely time, and to come out and to be able to say that to Mara. So know this, Mara, you're beaten. I mean, a lot of the time meditation isn't really like that. We come out of meditation and what's our first thought? It's not oh, we beat you, Mara. It's, the people upstairs were noisy, my ankle hurt, I have to go to the physio because my spine's hurting again. These are the things we come out of meditation and say, or we come out of meditation and say, I was too tired. I had too many projects. I have to send that email. But actually, when we can spend a lot of time, right? If that's all our meditation ever is, we miss out on so much. We miss out on the potential that meditation really has to offer us. Because I'm just trying to find the correct way to explain this. Where there is a human mind, there is the potential of the mind. And we've gone through this whole set of gathas. And it's not that, some of us have this amazing parami where, some of us are just, destined to become awakened because that's the way we were born. Like every single human mind has this same potential. Where there is a mind, there is a potential for awakening. And again, this is what the Buddha said to us in the Samyutta Nikaya. He said, monks, if those trees were sentient, if those trees had a mind, I would say they could also become awakened. So this is what the Buddha is telling us about just how possible this really is for us. And every single day, every day we get out of bed, and it has to be for a reason. And what should that reason be? We need a reason to get up in the morning. And like also in the Itivuttaka, the Buddha said to us, the Buddha said, monks, don't be afraid of merit. He said, ma punya bayi, because some of us live our lives, right? Like we're actually scared of merit. But the Buddha's saying just don't, because merit is another term for happiness. And what's actually meant by merit? In the Itivuttaka, the Buddha gives this set, where we go through generosity, we go through a process of taming ourselves, and then we cultivate metta meditation, which is, a variation on dana, sila, bhavana. So, every single day we have opportunities for dana, sila, bhavana, 365 days a year, and it's just there. It's there for free. And people sometimes wonder, what's what's the purpose of life? Where can I get meaning from? But people in very traditional Buddhist societies, actually, it's very rare to hear people having these sort of questions. These sort of questions are questions people have when societies start to secularize or they start to urbanize and people's connections get more distant. They lose touch with their religious traditions. For people who have that exposure to traditional Buddhist culture, we know that there are so many opportunities for dharma. There are so many opportunities to tame ourselves, through the practice of sila. If we're keeping 5 precepts, to continue keeping them, to be very consistent in observing Poya days, and to really just build on that foundation of virtue, so that when we do sit down and when we go to practice meditation, so much of that work has already been done, because we already did, like half the work beforehand, because from the time we got out of bed, we knew what our purpose was. And we weren't missing the opportunities that presented themselves for dana. We weren't missing the opportunities that presented themselves, to practice restraint. So when we actually go down to sit meditation, what sort of mind are we left with? We're left with this really beautiful, happy mind that we can really develop. And how do we develop it? By letting go of the thoughts of the world, by letting go of the kama vitaka, by letting go of sensuality, and really, just giving our mind the chance to shine to its fullest potential. And, maybe First jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. You know, maybe for some of us, eventually we'll get to see all of these things. You know, all of these wonders of the mind that are just, you know, actually we shouldn't call them wonders because they're really part of the mind's inherent potential. So those are just the reflections I had on that. I think I've spoken for an hour, so that's probably enough. I just really wanted to thank everyone for letting me join you all this evening. You know, we are based in Australia, so I'd also like to thank you as well for your tolerance and forgiveness in understanding that I'm joining you from overseas. I don't necessarily anyway, if anything I've said comes across as foreign, please forgive me. But I think if it's okay, I'll hand back to Minori because that might be a good point to wrap up.
Thank you very much, Venerable Sister. That was really amazing the way you started us with a very jarring, shocking, upsetting situation, awful situation. But you quickly showed how finally anyway, that we are listening to an Arahat speak to us. But here, the way I saw it, I mean, and a lot of very, very useful, very wondrous parts of the Dhamma, the teaching was touched on after that as we went along, which was very useful. And I thought it was brilliant to say that Dana Sila Bhavana, every day there is opportunity. And, you know, I mean, that's another nice way of saying it, no doubt. You know, it's just how re-saying things that, so I thought that was really wonderful. But looking at the 6 knowledges that she emphasizes, Bhikkhuni, this Arahant, the Uppalavanna, it shows that a lot of the psychic powers is what she's from starting with I think the Iddhi, and then the Cheto Pariya, Pubbenivasa, and so forth, Dibbasota, Dibbachaku, and then Asavakya. So that's the area which she was strongest at. But I would like to know, now those are not for, you know, we say that people who are really awakened in that process, would everybody make those the, you know, highlight? Because that's obviously her strength, her main ones. Am I right? That is why she
Sure. And
dwells on that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for pointing that out, Professor Minori, because I should have actually mentioned this as well. You know, that's also like Minori was mentioning, it's just part of her personality and part of her own, you know, previous cultivation, that's her specialty. You know, other arahants, for example, Venerable Sariputta was very famous for saying he had no interest in psychic powers whatsoever. And, you know, Venerable Sariputta, you know, being the Arahant Bhikkhu, who was foremost in wisdom. So we also have, you know, this kind of very active development of the mind in terms of how I see it anyway, in terms of mental power and strength, you know, balanced on the other hand by the alternative, which is to go even further, you know, into developing wisdom. And I think, you know, the way we can think about these psychic powers, it's like Ajahn Brahm says, it's like the bonus toy in the cereal box. You know, we don't go into Buddhist practice looking for these things. But for some people, it may be that once they have a certain level of attainment, you know, according to their own intentions, you know, that's what they're more naturally drawn to. So thank you so much, Professor Minori, for pointing that out.